Hello, everybody. With the new Descent of Dragons expansion just a few days away, I thought I would put out my own official card review. So let's get right into it. First, let me explain how I'm going to be rating these cards. So I'm not going to rate these cards by stars or tiers or anything like that. I'm just going to put them in several different categories. The first of which is competitive. And to me, that means the card will be in a tier 1, 2, or 3 deck fairly consistently. So that's my definition of a competitive card. And just below competitive, we have what I would call the fringe cards. These are cards that are sometimes in competitive decks, but alternate in and out of them. So still a good card, but not quite the cream of the crop of the competitive cards. So that's a fringe card. And then below the fringe cards, we have the garbage cards. These cards, you can call them pack filler, you can call them arena cards. These cards will not be in competitive decks consistently at all. So that is the definition of a garbage card. And then below the garbage cards, we have the tech cards. These are cards that are definitely only meta dependent if they'll ever see play. So there's only a few of these, but I thought they deserve their own separate category because they may be in competitive decks later down the line if we need to tech against something that's oppressive. And lastly, what I'm looking forward to the most, the meme and combo cards. So there aren't very many of them this expansion, but I'll try to highlight some and give you a few of my thoughts on some of the more special cards of the set. So let's get into it. All right, next class is Paladin. From the bird's eye view, they have some interesting support for several different archetypes. They have a small, wide aggro kind of token build. They definitely have a dragon build, and they have what seems to be a no neutral card build, what the developers are calling pure Paladin. Pretty bizarre. Let's look at the cards. The first card is a 1 mana side quest, Righteous Cause. Side quest: summon 5 minions, reward, give them +1/+1. It's one of those cards that's a little bit unfortunate because you have to spend the 1 mana to play it, preferably kind of early so you get the most bang for your buck. So it's kind of unfortunate it takes up a spot and it takes up a mana cost early in the game, but the effect is pretty powerful. If you just hit, several minions, you're getting a lot of value off 1 mana. It's kind of similar in idea to Mark of the Lotus for Druid back in the day. It's definitely a little more conditional than Mark of the Lotus, but still something I think that an aggro paladin can utilize. I would say there's going to be some form of aggro paladin, and I think this probably makes the cut. I would still say competitive, but it's kind of on the border between competitive and fringe because you may not even need this card. It may not be quite good enough in standard anyway, but I still see it being run in that kind of aggro style token deck, so I'm going to still say competitive for this one. Next card is the first dragon card. It's a 1 mana Sand Breath. Give a minion +1/+2. Give it Divine Shield if you're holding a dragon. So we've basically seen this card before. It was Divine Strength, which was a 1 mana give a minion +1/+2. So this one has a tremendous upside of getting Divine Shield if you happen to have a dragon. Paladin is an interesting spot because they already had some dragon support before this expansion even came out. So they're kind of in a good spot to actually finally make their dragon archetype viable and playable. And I think there will be a competitive dragon paladin deck. And I feel like this probably still belongs. I feel like this card is honestly somewhat on the weaker side, but if you just get one good trade with a Divine Shield on a minion that's already on the board, then it's kind of paying for itself there. Next is a side quest for Paladin. 2 mana Sanctuary. Side quest: take no damage for a turn. Reward: summon a 3/6 minion with taunt. Wow, that is one way to start the game. Coin out Sanctuary, don't take any damage, and get a 3/6 taunt on turn 2. That is pretty formidable. um, very very strong if that happens. Of course, this is less good in the late game. I mean, getting a 2 mana 3/6 taunt on 10 mana is definitely nowhere near as good as getting it on turn 1 or turn 2. So they have to be kind of aware of that. This card again gets a little bit worse over time. I think this card still makes the cut in Control Paladin, maybe even Dragon Paladin. And I also think this may make the cut, especially in Aggro Paladin, because it has such the potential to high roll you in the early game. If an Aggro Paladin deck gets a turn 2 3/6 taunt, they're going to steamroll you. So just because of that high roll possibility, I think this will be running Aggro Paladin as well. Definitely looking forward to a turn 2 3/6 taunt in my face. Yikes. Next we have a 3 mana 2/3 dragon, Bronze Explorer, Lifesteal, Battlecry, Discover a Dragon. This is an auto include in any Dragon Paladin deck. It's so valuable to have the extra dragon in hand to activate your other synergistic cards. Pretty much all these dragon cards that provide another dragon to your hand are going to be run in any kind of dragon deck because you need them. The fact that it has lifesteal is nice, but Paladin has so much access to healing already, it's probably just overkill at this point. So I don't think the lifesteal is super relevant considering all the tools that Paladin has to heal, although we are going to talk about a card in just a second that could potentially buff this card and make the lifesteal perhaps a little more relevant. So good anti-aggro tool, good value tool, absolutely sees play in Dragon Paladin. Very, very competitive. Alrighty, the aforementioned buff card is a 3 mana 3/3 legendary minion for Paladin, Dragon Rider Talritha, that's how you say it. Death Rattle. Give a dragon in your hand +3/+3 and this Death Rattle. This card is reminiscent of the old legendary weapon for Paladin, Val'anyr, as it's a kind of a reoccurring Death Rattle idea. But this one's very specific. You have to run a lot of dragons to make this card worth it. But there's plenty of dragons out there that are very, very nice buff targets. So this is absolutely competitive in a Dragon Paladin deck. So I think we'll be seeing this guy a lot. A lot. One thing to be aware of with this card, much like the old Val'anyr decks, is that Silence just absolutely destroys this card. So it'll be interesting to see how much Silence is prevalent in the meta once we start playing with the new cards. But I think Silence cards will always kind of keep this legendary card in check. It'll never get too out of control because people will just start ticking in Silence. So I think this is a very good card, but it'll never be quite a great card because of the fact that it can be silenced so easily. So still, 3/3 hand buff is pretty significant, and it'll definitely see play. Absolutely. The next card for Paladin is a 3 mana 1/2 mech called Skyclaw. Your other mechs have +1 attack. Battlecry, summon 2 1/1 microcopters. I wouldn't say this card necessarily has to be played in an exclusively mech deck. It's really just for the aggro small token style Paladin that I think will be viable. And it's a very good card in that deck. Of course, you'd want to run some extra mechs just to get the benefit from Skyclaw, but the fact that it summons you 2 mechs right away and you get the benefit from the effect of this card is quite strong already. So very nice card. The first of the pure Paladin cards is a 4 mana 4/2 Lightforged Zealot. Battlecry, if your deck has no neutral cards, equip a 4/2 True Silver Champion. It's an undeniably powerful effect to get a free True Silver, but the question becomes, do you build a deck in such a way that you have no neutral cards, or do you just play this card in the late game and hope that you have no neutral cards? Kind of like putting a Zephyrs in a duplicate deck, right? Getting a late game True Silver is much different than getting a True Silver on turn 3 or turn 4 for free. So that's where this card would really shine if you coin it out or if you play it on 4. So getting it on, turn 20 isn't super duper relevant. So I would say this is garbage. I would say it's not even fringe. I would say it's the garbage tier, unfortunately. Oh boy, probably the most interesting card for Paladin's expansion is a 4 mana 8/8 legendary dragon minion, Nozdormu the Timeless. Battlecry, set each player to 10 mana crystals. That's quite the effect. Ideally, you'd build your deck in such a way that the 10 mana crystals would benefit you more than your opponent, which isn't that hard to do because most aggro decks and most kind of like mid-range style decks probably won't utilize the mana that well. Some people are talking about with this card that you could use Call to Adventure or Witchwood Piper and have this be your lowest mana cost card so you can tutor it out really quickly. And that's a good idea. It's not super duper reliable, but I think it'll be a fun card to experiment with in kind of like a big dual style Paladin. I'm not sure this card puts like the dual big style Paladin over the top as being like a tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 deck, but I think it'll be a very fun deck. The question becomes, do you play Nozdormu in kind of a more traditional Dragon Paladin deck? And you probably still can, because I think you can kind of make kind of like a higher end Dragon Paladin deck that would utilize Nozdormu and not make his Battlecry such a tremendous downside when your opponent gets the 10 mana crystals first. So it's a very interesting card, and I think I'm gonna have some fun playing with it for sure. I would still probably say fringe competitive. I don't think we'll see it all the time, but when we do, it's gonna be fun. All right, next card for Paladin is a 5 mana 4/6 dragon, Amber Watcher, Battlecry, restore 8 health. Honestly, it's kind of a boring card, but it's still very, very good. It's a very solid dragon for the mana cost, has a nice effect, nice stats, so I expected to see play in a vast majority of dragon-style paladin decks. And for my combo purposes, maybe we can get another Akanai and do some fun stuff with it, right? Get that easy Akanai and Paladin off Tangle for Mystic. I think it's a very solid card, but it's a very boring card, honestly. But it'll definitely see play competitively in the Dragon Paladin deck. So solid but boring. And the last card for Paladin is another pure Paladin card. It's a 7 mana 7/7 Lightforged Crusader. Battlecry, if your deck has no neutral cards, add 5 random Paladin cards to your hand. I think this is the better of the two pure Paladin cards because this one is intended to play more late game, whereas getting a Truce over in the late game isn't as relevant. Getting 5 random cards can be super relevant in a late style control game to outvalue your opponent. So this card is much better. I still don't think this card finds a home in any particular deck because the Paladin cards are so all over the place in terms of how valuable they are. I mean, if you're getting 5 of them, you're likely to get at least one good one, but I don't think this is worthy of a deck slot. I think you'd be probably better off just playing like Archivist Elysiana at that point. So it's not quite there to me. It's an interesting card. It's a very good arena card for late game arena if you happen to get to late game arena, but very interesting. But ultimately, I don't think it'll see much play, so I think it's kind of garbage tier, unfortunately. All right, let's review the Paladin cards. The first one, Righteous Cause, I feel like is kind of on the border between competitive and fringe. I feel like right now it will still be played in the token aggressive style deck. However, I could also see Righteous Cause being cut later down the line because you'd rather just play a 1 mana minion than actually playing Righteous Cause. So I would still say it's competitive at this point, but it's bordering towards fringe. Sandbreath, I think, will find its home in Dragon decks, even though I don't think it's especially powerful. It's still powerful enough to be run in a Dragon deck, I think. Sanctuary, I think, is incredibly good, and it's a scary aggro paladin tool more than a control tool, honestly, I think. Bronze Explorer easily goes in any dragon deck. It has the benefit of generating another dragon for your hand, and it gives you a little bit of healing, so auto include. Dragon Rider probably goes in any dragon deck as well. Just too much value to deny. It pretty much has to be silenced or you're just going to run the opponent out of the gym. Skyclaw, I think, finds its home in a competitive aggro deck as well. I don't think necessarily it has to be super mech focused, but probably a couple mechs in there as well. Paladin already has some good small class mechs to run with Skyclaw, so I think it fits in that deck rather nicely. Definitely competitive. Lightforged Zealot, I think, is garbage. The effect is just not strong enough to warrant not running any neutral cards in your deck, and it's not good enough in the late game to warrant including it in your deck, so it's just not quite there. Nozdormu is a very interesting card. It can definitely high roll you in the early game, and assuming you built a deck that synergizes around Nozdormu quite well, then I think you'll be doing fine. But I'm not sure Nozdormu Paladin will be the premier form of Paladin. I think traditional Dragon Paladin will be better than that. So I think it's kind of bordering the line between competitive and fringe, but I'd probably give it the competitive nod still, because I think it might be in traditional Dragon Paladin as well. Amber Watcher is a very boring card, but very competitive at the same time, so it'll find a home in Dragon Paladin. And Lightforged Crusader is not quite good enough to me. I would say it's better than Lightforged Zealot, but still garbage tier. Historically, Paladin has been my least favorite class to play, and I don't think it's going to change much this expansion. Nozdormu is probably the most fun and interesting card to me, but that's really about all that Paladin has to offer my purposes and why I play Hearthstone. So, interesting cards, but nothing too exciting to me. And that's Paladin. Thank you guys so much for watching, and look forward to the next review.